So I swear, whenever I don't, whenever I cannot record a video, I always got, I always get an inspiration about what I should say in a video, and all ideas are just flowing, and that's in the daylight. But in the nighttime, all those ideas are stuck, and I just got lost in this silence, and I have no idea what to talk about. So I'm just gonna be rolling everything that comes into my mind. I almost quit smoking. I was having a toothache a few days ago for 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 some days, 3 or 4 days I think, or 5 days. And in that period of time, it always cigarettes always felt disgusting, and I didn't know why I smoked. But right now the toothache disappeared, and I just come back right to it. So about cognitive functions, I'm starting to think if the way we try to frame it is actually correct. Like, are we actually just forcing this construct of four cognitive functions: sensation, intuition, thinking, feeling? Are we just forcing them to correlate with the reality of our psyche? Well, I'm starting I'm starting to think so. So at first I thought that sensation, that we have these four mental uh, areas inside of our brain that corresponds with the four big groups of activities that we are designed to do. For example, uh, we use our sensations to receive information from the other world, and then we also use feelings to 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 move our bodies, to coordinate our our movements. And then intuition and thinking correlates to that, but internally. So intuition is the imaginary sensation, and then thinking is imaginary movements. So thinking is about planning, right? But I've been trying to recombine and mix and match all of these together, and I came upon another possibility that this. So let me just describe how the results of these configurations that I came up with. So first, we have the dichotomy of perception and judgment. Oh no no, let's move back for a second. And we we have this we have okay, we have sensation, feeling, intuition, and thinking. When we say sensation, we mean mm, uh, an externally excitatory excitatory. I don't know how it's pronounced, but what I mean is we have the dichotomy of excitatory and inhibitory. Excitatory corresponds to physical functions, which is sensation and feeling, right? The difference between feeling and sensation is feeling directs its perception, right? So feeling directs sensation. It comes, there is this internal motivation, and it directs someone's perception. While sensation, instead, it is directed by external forces, while they're activating their actions, while they're activating their movements. Their eyes are distracted everywhere because they are distracted by all of the stimuli that's coming from the environment. while they're extraverting, not extraverting, while they're externalizing. So that's one way to view sensation and feeling, which I think is the correct way to view them. And we also have inhibitory functions, which is intuition and thinking. Intuition happens when when you're when you're inhibiting your movements because you're distracted by a stimuli. Oh, fuck. So it's a form of recall. There's a stimuli, and that triggers your inhibition. So you go internalizing. While thinking, it is also inhibitory, but it is self-directed. There is this internal motivation to just internalize. So from there, we can kind of sense the difference between perception and judgment. And perception is sensation and intuition, and judgment is feeling and thinking. Perception leads you by distracting you, uh, by letting the stimuli from environment distract you. So it's externally motivated, right? While judgment, on the other hand, it is self-motivated. So the motivation comes internally. You can say that the motivation comes from intuition. So perception and judgment is related to whether your motivation comes from sensation or it comes from intuition, which is internal, but sensation is external. That's how we can differentiate between perception and judgment. Now, when we're trying to differentiate between whether someone is extroverted or introverted, then we can gauge that by seeing their excitatory and inhibitory mechanism. When they're exit when it's excitatory, it means that person is extroverted. When it is inhibitory, the person is introverting. And by extroverting, we mean that their feeling function activates. And when they're introverting, their thinking function instead activates. So So extraversion can also be categorized as the expression of whether the whether the whether the motivation expresses itself through feeling, which is extroverted, or expresses itself through thinking, which is introverted. And once again, I need to remind you that feeling is external or physical movements, while thinking is our internal imagined movements. Right. So now you have these two these two domains where motivation is located, about the source of motivation, which is sensation or intuition, and the target of motivation, which is feeling or thinking. So I think that's what saying about external external perception and external action doesn't really say anything about the type. It's only describing these four aspects in our brain that is universally uh, po- possessed by humans. Everyone has these four aspects, but when we're talking about type, when we're talking about whether someone is sensation type, whether they're intuition type, whether they're feeling type or thinking type, then we're talking about this mechanism that I described earlier. When, when someone is sensation type, it means that their motivation is primarily comes from the external. And so they're gonna be distracted by all of the stimuli from the environment. This is for just for an example, and you can apply this to all other functions. Now, I think I need to make a distinction externalizing externalizing and extroversion, and between internalizing and introversion. Externalizing only Externalizing and internalizing only only tell us about whether they prefer feeling or thinking, whether they prefer to express their motivation externally or internally. But this is not what Jung meant when he talks when he talked about extroversion and introversion. according to Jung, I think what he meant when he was talking about extroversion, he was talking about the attitude or the or how someone reacts to stimuli. And I like to to give a metaphor, not metaphor, but I think this is this is how we can correctly view this mechanism of extroversion and introversion. So the way I understand it, extroversion is a, an attitude of assimilation, while introversion is an attitude of aversion. So what assimilation and aversion do? What do how do they manifest within within the functions? Assimilation means that the subject perceives the object to be positive. So the subject tends to consume them or produces them. Yes. It consumes them in terms of perception, and it produces them in terms of judgment. While introversion or aversion, it 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 behaves, it acts, it sees objects as it sees objects as negative. So the object has a negative influence to the subject. So so the subject either tries to avoid the object, or it tries to expulse, it tries to push away or amputate or purify the objects from within the subject. So it works like purification and also uh, avoidance and observation. So the 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 object. So that's basically how I think Jung understood extroversion and introversion. You can even say that basically extroversion is positive emotions, while introversion is negative emotions. So in terms of big five, you can translate that as extroversion and neuroticism continuums. But the mechanism of how that happens is the way that I described before. It happens through assimilation or aversion. Right. So now we have come upon three dichotomies. Let me write it down. I think I should pause this for a second.